connected on all of the different places. And then we'll jump in here real briefly. Again, in case this is your first week with us, or your first week live, I'm here with Diane Verratti. She is the Director of Operations at Emmanuel Church, and Jarrell Belanger, who's the Executive Pastor at Emmanuel Church. We all work in the same, we don't really call it an office anymore. It's technically a starting point room, but that's where we all sit, at least during the day, and gather together and work together. And I'm real thankful for both of them. And the catalyst for this conversation came from us just talking. And when George Floyd passed away, we felt like it was time to have this conversation with others in the room, like you. And so we'll jump in today. We've gone about an hour each week. I don't know that we'll go a full hour tonight, but one of the things that we've heard from several people is a really simple question. What should I do? Or what can I do? And oftentimes that comes from someone who's white, just wanting to stand in solidarity with the Black community and fight for change and be anti-racist. I think that's one of the things that I've learned most in this process is the difference between just not being racist and being anti-racist. So I want to start with a couple quotes, and Jarrell, I'd love your thoughts on these, and Diane as well. Just quotes as I've been reading through different blog posts and articles and things like that. This first one comes from Ibram X. Kendi. He's a historian, author, professor, and has written several books. He says, being an anti-racist requires persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular self-examination. And I really appreciated that, because I think one of our tendencies is to point the finger at what other people are doing or what other people aren't doing. And we kind of always give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, right? Like, well, it would never be me. I wouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, one of the things that I've realized is I need to do even more of that. You know, I had shared a couple weeks ago about when the boys were crossing the street and I was at a traffic stop. That was a moment for me to go, that fired off in my brain and it shouldn't have, right? Do you guys find that to be consistent with what you would say is required to when you start thinking about what would we do, it really does begin with us, right? Ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree that, you know, the purpose of the conversation is not about everyone else. It's about us and, you know, what the conversations mean to us and how they shape what we think and change what we think and what have you. And it is a conscious effort to constantly, you know, be thinking about it, and not from a burdensome, constantly be thinking about them, but being self-aware so that when you do this thing or that thing or the thing that makes you go, right, that you're asking yourself, why do I believe that? Why do I feel this way? What's behind that? So, yeah.
Those 3 points really spoke to me too. It requires some persistence in my own thought process. And, you know, I have similar preconceived notions, I think, Josh, as you mentioned with teenagers crossing the street. You know, sometimes things just jump into my mind and there's no reason for it. And I have to catch myself and say, wait a minute, what are you thinking? And this is an embarrassing thing to admit, but I will tell you guys because I pretty much tell you everything. But a couple of weeks ago, I saw a Black lady walking in from the parking lot and I didn't recognize her. And she was, the office is closed and she was coming in. And I thought, I guess I better get, like a life care application ready because somebody's coming in and needing help. Well, she had an appointment with one of our staff members. And, that just brought me up short. It's like, wow, why did I think that? Would I have thought about that with a white woman whom I didn't know. And I don't know the answer to that. But again, I think the self-awareness, self-criticism, it's really key.
Yeah.
Really key.
And thanks so much for saying that, Di. I know that's not easy to share. And
I was embarrassed. I'm really embarrassed to say that.
But what I've always appreciated about Jarrell, because a lot of times Jarrell becomes my, what would be the word, confessor, the person I confess to. He always says it doesn't mean you're an evil person, right, Jarrell? I mean, I think that's what you've said to me several times. It doesn't mean you're horrid. It just means you've got some biases or preconceived things that you've got to work through.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. And it's the bias. We all have them. Everyone. There's not a person that's immune to having bias. And racial bias, ethnic bias, so yeah, we all have them, and when we have them, we need to think, okay, well, what's the source of that? And I think using Diane's example of it wasn't like she's spending her time thinking, okay, I need to think about this, I need to think about that, but she's become more self-aware so that when she has this thought, something immediately makes her think, why am I having this thought? But yeah, this is not necessarily anything other than racial bias, right? Based on things we've learned or heard, or something reinforced that thought. And it's about saying, okay, I need to check it.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the good things about how God made us is that our brains are malleable organs, and they can change, and we can create. My wife's taught me a lot about this, because this is part of the stuff that she talks about with work. We all have neural pathways in our brains that it's like reflexive. We can almost not help ourselves when we have some of these thoughts. But the truth is, you can train your brain and create new neural pathways that make it different. And so I think that's where the self-awareness and criticism and self-check become really important, because it puts us in a position to do that, right?
Yeah.
It also helps, I think, to help me avoid pointing fingers at other people. That's not what I need to be about. I need to point the finger at me, and examine myself, not look for discrepancies in other people's behavior or attitudes or thoughts. It's about me and what I think and how I present my thoughts.
And that's so biblical, right?
Yeah.
Specs and laws.
Absolutely, it is.
That's the truth.
All those crazy things that the Bible makes you think about.
Yeah.
Can't get away.
Yeah, that come to real vivid detail when you're in places like this in life. I love this metaphor. Comes from a woman named Christina Torres, and she's a teacher. I don't know for sure where I came across this metaphor, but I love this. We're all on the moving walkway. If you're not racist, you're kind of just standing still on the moving walkway, but you're still complicit in societal racism because you're part of society. The only way to be anti-racist is to walk in the other direction.
Wow.
And I think that is so powerful, because we've all been kids at one point or another, and we've gotten on those walking pathways at the airport. And to walk in the other direction and actually make ground is not easy. And you make people mad because they're just wanting to go with the flow. And you're going to have to put in twice the effort that anybody else is, because you're going against the flow of traffic and the ground moving underneath you. And I don't know, I just appreciated that, because it's tempting to just stand there. And I think for most of my life, that's been the temptation. Like, I'm not walking in the same direction as the walkway, like adding to it. I'm not making it worse, that momentum worse. But I'm not going against it either. I'm just kind of floating along.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the breaking point for me, when George Floyd was killed. And up to that point, I had been silent, right? Agree with stuff, disagree with stuff, but never said, hey, this is what I think, or this is what I feel, or anything like that. And I think I've expressed before, I have guilt as it relates to Trayvon Martin, and his scenario and how he was killed, because I didn't say anything. I thought it was wrong, right? But I didn't say anything. And I feel like if, the weight is, if I had said something, maybe something would be different. And I think that goes for, if all of us had said something, maybe we wouldn't be here right now, so yeah.
It's so interesting. We were, it's funny, Jarrell and I were actually a part of a meeting just before we jumped on this, and Jarrell had to get back to his house. We met outside at my house, and Jarrell had to get back to his for this call. So I was a part of the meeting a little longer, and someone had said that they were watching The West Wing on Netflix as just like passing the time, and they said they were amazed that a significant topic over and over again in The West Wing was race, and that was the mid 90s. Like, how many people have been silent that it's still such an issue, right? And we haven't, because I can remember when Trayvon Martin was killed, I was in college. I mean, and I went to college older in life, but still, it was 10 years ago, right? I mean, wasn't Trayvon 10 years ago?
Eight. I think it was 2012, maybe, if I recall correctly. Okay. So almost 10 years ago.
And it's shocking to think that then I think everybody thought this is going to be the thing that changes it. And here we are, 8-9 years later, and we're still at the same thing. So I guess the lesson in that for me is, it's not enough to be sad that these things happen, or that systemic racism is real. We have to fight it. We have to be against it. We have to do some things that are going to change that tide.
Yeah.
So I came across a list of things that's kind of a hodgepodge of several lists of things that when white people ask, what can I do? What should I do? And I thought, Jarrell, it would just be good for us to kind of walk through. There's 9 things on this list. And us just to talk about each one. And if you're watching with us, whether you're on Zoom or Facebook, these lists, you'll find them anywhere on the internet. But I'd encourage you to write a few that stick out to you. I would write them down and kind of decide, I'm going to do some of these things. I'm actually going to get proactive about it. So the first one is this: expand your circle of friends to include people of color or people who do not look like you. And we've talked a lot about that. I think our kind of resounding symbol in this is friendship, that friendship is really, really important. Jarrell, let me ask you this in light of that, because I know we don't disagree at all that that's something that white people could do. As a Black man, what is the best way for somebody like me to approach you? Because I think this can feel awkward at times. Like Diane and I were actually, as we were thinking through some things for this call, like, will you be my Black friend feels really uncomfortable, right? So can you help us understand, and anybody that's watching, like, how do you want to be approached around this topic, someone that's just looking to expand and diversify their friendship circle?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to do is start the way you would start any type of relationship. And that's just asking questions and getting to know someone. I mean, the reality is, for lots of people, race is a really sensitive subject, and depending on how you bring it up, people can become really bothered by it. So I think the first thing to do is simply just to start getting to know someone. Like I think about, as when we started working together, we didn't jump in having conversations about race, right? We just kind of started to get to know each other, realized we had similar interests. We found the same things funny, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's the same thing, that you have to find, that person. And so it'll start out with innocent questions of, wherever there's a person of color in a group, whether it be, at a PTA meeting, or, with parents at at your kid's school, or if you belong to a club or any type of organizations, or if you volunteer anywhere. It's just striking up conversations,
Yeah.
and leave it really innocent and let it go where it goes. Every time you say hi to somebody, it doesn't mean that it's going to go anywhere, right? You just put yourself out there and you see what happens. And so there is no quick way to get there, to be able to have those deeper conversations until you just have friendly conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what's so cool about what you said, that we discovered we had similar interests. I honestly think we could have gone on like one of those shows where they hide us from each other and we just start sharing our things, and we would have gone like, man, I love this guy. I think like it's so important to remember we're not from different planets. You're gonna have a ton of stuff in common. Like we love the same movies, the same TV shows, the same music, the same sports, like all that kind of stuff. And I think, it's up to us to kind of go, we're two humans and we're going to find some things that are in common, right?
Yeah. Someone who should know, because she's married to Jarrell, just popped up with a good suggestion here. She said, if you know someone who has a good relationship with a Black person, you could always ask to get together with them someday.
That's so good.
That would be like
so smart, Jarrell.
A real easy entry there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's smart. That's maybe the best way to do it, truthfully.
Yeah.
All right, the next thing on the list was educate yourself. This was one where I'm like, oh, I feel funny keeping this on here, but I think it's important. Educate yourself about whiteness, white supremacy, racism, and what it means to be anti-racist. And I think the catch in me in putting it on there was like, I think it's hard for white people to understand some of what goes along with being a white person that you are not aware of. And when someone points it at you, you're like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, do you agree with that one, Jarrell? Because we've talked about it's important to educate yourself on Black history and culture, and so that you have familiarity with those things. But I mean, would you agree? Like it's important for people to understand how white supremacy looks, right?
Absolutely. If you're going to be anti-racist, then you have to have a full grasp on what that means. Mm-hmm. Racism is not simple and it's not complex, and there are all types of terminologies and jargon and things that get people going. And so I think if you're going to be anti-racist, then you have to understand what that means. You need to understand things like how many of you have used the term racial bias before, right? Mm-hmm. And if you haven't used racial bias, then it's okay. Well, what exactly does that mean? Yeah. Or you may, I remember someone asked a question about reverse racism, and well, what does that mean? So mm-hmm. if you're going to be anti-racist, then you need to know what you're being against, what it is to be against it, essentially, actively against it.
Yeah, well said. Number 3, discuss anti-racism and the steps you're taking to be for the community for the Black community. Is essentially what it says. So it's the idea of talking about it. I mean, this maybe goes hand in hand with the friendship piece, but it's so natural for you and I to talk about it because we've been doing it for years. But how should someone bring that up in a circle, whether it's a white person and a Black person together, or even if it's 2 white people? Like, what would you say is the most constructive and simplest way to initiate that discussion? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would guess it's probably. I mean, there's always something going on, right? Even when things are not as tense as they are right now in America, there's always an issue, and so it's about asking questions. As you develop a friendship, you ask deeper questions, and so you might ask, what are your thoughts on that? I'm curious to know what you think. So I would say those are the kind of questions you want to present based on circumstances. If there's a good movie, like I guess it was 2 years ago when there was a whole thing about not enough people are represented during the Oscars.
Yeah.
Right. So there's always something going on, right, that we can circle back to and ask questions, or you can ask questions. So I would say I would wait for an event to occur, or maybe something happens to you personally. Hey, this happened to me. What are your thoughts and feelings about that?
Yeah.
But because there's always something, I would say just pull from that. I wouldn't start with, so I was thinking, I have this, out of the kind of the blue type questions. I would make it part of a conversation, and again, the conversation will go where it goes.
Yeah.
If you use that approach.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. And there's two things that came to mind when you were saying ask questions, because when I was in student ministries and we would, do training for adults that were volunteering in the ministry and we're going to work with teenagers, it was always about ask questions, ask questions, ask questions, ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the rules was don't ask a question that they can answer with yes or no.
Right.
So like one of the worst ways you could start that discussion would be, are you against racism? No. I mean, nobody's going to say no, but they'll say, yes, I'm against it. Well, that's the end of the discussion. So be strategic in how you ask the question. I think tying it to a current event or issue is really well.
Yeah, that's great advice, because it's natural. It's just natural. Okay, here's another one from the wise woman, Elizabeth Jarrell. Again, great advice from a Black woman. When you are sincere, there is no such thing as a stupid question.
That's good.
I like that, because that kind of alleviates a little bit of stress on my part if I can come across as, hey, I'm not just checking a list off by talking to you. This is something I really want to know. I'm interested, and maybe you can help me. So thanks again, Sherelle.
Yeah, it's so much about posture, right? What's the posture with which you're coming with this question? Is it I'm trying to needle and I'm trying to get you riled up, or I'm trying to be a jerk, or I'm genuinely trying to learn and I accept that I don't know everything?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you can do is also not just be looking for them to share, but you share also, because that's where you get a sense for a person's sincerity and a sense for their heart. I mean, there are questions that I've been asked that are offensive on the face of the question. And like, I can't believe you would think or even process something that way. But except for the fact that I knew the person and I knew that the question literally came from a place of ignorance, was I able to not be mad at that person, even though their question, was like, what? So because again, if that's not evident, then it does come across as, like, why would you ask me something like that? That's the kind of response you get, because there is that missing sincerity, in it.
Yeah, that's so well said.
Yeah.
4, I love this one. We've talked about this briefly, but I think there could be some practical tips given here. Talk to your kids. I think as a parent, our tendency is to try and protect them from hard things and scary things, which, in a lot of our minds, this might have been a season that was real scary. But it's so important to have this discussion with our kids, because our kids are our chance to change it, right? Like in my mind, my best chance at making a true difference is to grow up 4 sons who are anti-racist and who understand and speak up when things are said that shouldn't be said, and they are looking to see a system be different, right? How do you do that well, right? Like how do you sit down? I mean, if I have the benefit of, again, every day I could sit down and go, my kids ask this question, what do you think I should say? Jarrell, if you were just going to coach the people on this call, if they were saying, I'm going to have a conversation with my kids, what would you say is the number 1 or 1 and 2 things that that kids need to understand so that things do get better in the next generation?
Yeah, I think, the challenge is obviously that kids is a broad spectrum, and depending on their age determines kind of what the conversation looks like. but I think you want to drive that conversation to what's okay and what's not okay, but also to not just be a good person, be a person who stands up for those who need help. And so I think that's just a theme that makes the difference. You know, because you can say, hey, it's wrong to do this and it's wrong to do that. But that doesn't mean when they see someone else doing wrong, that just telling them that it's wrong doesn't automatically make them say, hey, that's wrong.
Yeah.
And so you have to create, kids who say, hey, that's not cool, or that's not right, or that's no fun. And teach them ways in which to do that. I think about, the situation with Jarrell when he was at the football game, right? And no one said anything, and I'm willing to bet most of the people around, because they were saying it loud enough for him to hear. It wasn't like they were whispering to him, or whispering to his friend either. It was loud enough for people to hear, and no one said anything. And there were probably kids standing around thinking, that's so wrong, or that's not cool. But it wasn't, but they weren't moved to say, hey, to the kid who was doing it, that's not funny, or knock it off, or something like that.
Yeah.
As an old mom, or mom of old kids, as Jarrell revealed a while back, those kinds of attitudes, I think, are more caught than taught. When kids see us treating people kindly and not talking about them, I think that says a lot. I learned when I was a kid, I don't think I've shared this with you. We had a small church, and our custodian was an African-American man. Tall, older, slow. His name was Joe Blount. And one day, either I said or one of my friends said, I can't remember, something about Joe. And my mother very kindly said, he is an adult and you will call him Mr. Blount. Well, she didn't say, he's black and you're white. And, she just said, he's an adult and you call him Mr. Blount. And that spoke a lot I still remember it. Probably happened 60 years ago. But he was an adult. So the lesson I learned was an adult is an adult, whether he's black or white, and he deserves your respect. Yeah. So I kind of think the taught thing has helped me over the years.
Yeah, and Martha agrees with you.
I was just going to say, Martha has a great comment here. Yeah.
So what she said, children watch what their parents do. The best thing to do is to lead by example. I couldn't agree more. And I think that, even like what Jarrell said in the conversations, like share your story, I think there's value in letting my kids know some of the things that I've thought wrong, right. For a long time, and let them see where I've made mistakes or how I was raised didn't help the situation or whatever the case may be. I think there's value and vulnerability with our kids too. So
yeah, you have to live it. I remember this was, I don't know, several years ago, maybe almost 10 now. And I was in a small group with this couple, an older couple who had adult children. And as I kind of found out the different things that their children do, one was a pastor, one's a missionary, the other one's at the time, I believe, a Christian college working toward something noble. And I remember asking, like, what did you do to raise such great kids? And her reply was, you got to live it. You can't just tell them what's right and wrong. You have to live what you teach, because if you don't live it, it won't make a difference.
Yeah, that's so true. It always makes me think of 2016 when the Cubs won the World Series. I've been a Cubs fan my whole life. And, all of a sudden everybody's wearing Cubs hats, but they couldn't name one player on the team. And I just think, to me, that's always the example. Like, it's not enough to just talk about it. It's not enough to just put on the hat. You've really got to believe it. You've really got to live it. So,
yeah,
that's good. Get involved in organizations fighting racial justice or fighting for racial justice and that reflect your values and policy views. And I put my own thought, because they are out there. I think that, there are certain organizations that can be very polarizing and we can reject them outright because they align maybe with one side of the aisle over another. But there are those organizations on both sides of the aisle, and Christian or not Christian, there are organizations that do align with your values. And I think that it's important we take those steps to find those organizations and give two things. I think we should give financially to them to help further that cause, but also our time, volunteer with them. And I think that, you know, the question's probably, well, what are they? That's everybody's homework, is for you, because I could list a bunch and we'll all find reasons why they're not the one for us. So I think there's value in doing that research yourself. But to me, that just ties in with what we just were saying, right? It's not enough for us to say, I want to see this be different. We've got to actually do something.
Right.
Yeah.
So, let's see. I love this one. Diane, you and I actually talked about this a little bit today. I just think it's so important. Contact elected officials. Express your desire for systemic change.
Right.
I think one of the most underrated privileges that we have, all people have this privilege, and opportunities we have, is to have a voice in our local government, right? And I know that sometimes nationally it might feel like we can't, that's like spitting in the ocean. But locally, we can reach out and we can say, you know, I'd love to hear what we're doing as a community to fight this. I'd love to hear what training is being offered to police officers or whatever the case may be that's going to make this different.
Yeah. Well, you know, that hits me because of my love of not politics, but local community involvement, you know, and I've been there for many years. And I certainly echo that. If your officials even on the local level, they're much more closely tied to the voters. You know, when you talk to them, when you express your opinions, it means a lot more because they're not pulling in millions of votes. They might be pulling in hundreds of votes, and yours counts a lot more heavily. So that's a big one. Get to know them, get to know how they feel, and express your feelings to them too. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, Diane, I love that you said that, because you spend a lot of time in that world as a volunteer and on several different committees and things like that. For someone that would say, and you've kind of already answered this, but for someone that would say, well, that doesn't actually make a difference, they don't actually listen, I feel like you'd say, no, they do, right?
Yeah, and I think you have to establish some credibility. You know, if something happens and you jump up and put a post on Facebook or holler and scream and yell, you know, I go to city council meetings. I think that every one of us lives in a municipality that has some form of governing body, whether it be trustees or aldermen or council members. My advice is go to your meetings and get to know who they are. If there's one who represents your particular neighborhood, as you know, in my community, get to know that person. You know, support that person if his or her views are yours, and make yourself known. If you establish credibility and the fact that you care about an issue and you've done your homework and you're doing something about it, that individual or those people will listen to you and they will respect you. And I can say that from experience. So just go. Get involved and meet them. I mean, Josh, I know you've been really intentional about getting out into the Gurnee community over the last couple of years. And that's given you a lot of credibility with a lot of people. School district, on the village board. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. And Jarrell, like, respond to this statement. Tell me I'm wrong, or hopefully you'll say I'm right. It's really important for people that look like me and Diane to speak up with local officials and things. Why?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason why I'll take it all the way back to my statement about Trayvon Martin and why I haven't said anything to this point. is because there are lots of people that are Black or people of color that are voicing their concerns. And at some point, it gets lost in the noise. Or if I speak on every time there's an issue, or then maybe I'm the angry Black guy or something like that, and so I lose credibility, which goes directly to what Diane talked about. So that's a big difference maker.
Yeah, and it's like your community is the hurting one. Why should you have to? We should stand up for you. You shouldn't have to stand up for yourself, right?
It goes back to your initial message, I think, Josh, back on July 5th about bearing other people's burdens.
Yeah.
We have to do that. We have to be willing to share those burdens and carry them and use our own privilege, background, weight to make change.
Yeah. Totally agree. This one's really, really important. And it'll be really, really scary for people, but speak out whenever you hear racist overtones or witness racial behavior. Adopt a zero tolerance policy. I think the reason that's scary is because some people will go, well, that might mean I lose some friends. And that might mean there's some tension in my family at the next family get together, right? Diane, you had shared that on one of these calls before. And I know this is kind of tied to the elected officials thing too, but that is so important. Just like Jarrell Jr. at the football game, zero tolerance. Like, I'm going to say something. And I think one of the best ways is to not say that could be offensive to someone else, right? Like, if it's me that's going to speak up, they need to hear that's offensive to me. I'm offended by that. Because I think it's so easy to just shuffle it off like, well, that could offend somebody here. No, it's personal, right? Like, I care about this.
That's so significant, and that is personal, because the ask is not that you just speak on my behalf. The ask is that you care. And that's the difference maker. Because when you care, it's no longer you saying, hey, don't say that because Jarrell might find it offensive, like you said. Don't say that because I find it offensive. And when you're in it at that level, right, it's a different response. And you're no longer saying you're defending me, you're with me, and you're defending us.
Ooh, that'll preach.
Gee, Jarrell. Here's another comment that is practical, I think, in this instance. If you feel uncomfortable at first saying it in front of people, talk to them privately. She says saying something is better than saying nothing. And that might be the way to start.
And at least they learn that's not acceptable around this person. And the less and less space there is where it's acceptable, the less and less it happens. And we actually start to change that trajectory. I love this one. I'm a living testament to the power of it. Listen to Black people. White people don't know best or how to fix this. The way this was worded in one of the lists was, take your cues from the Black community. Let the Black community lead you. And again, I feel like so often I've just gone to Jarrell and said, what should I say? What should we do? Where should we go with this? And it's not saying, Jarrell, right? I hope you don't hear that as you got to fix this.
Right.
It's more, I'll do whatever. I just want to make sure I'm doing the things that are going to be most helpful and right.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that I haven't been on social media a lot lately, but when George Floyd was killed, I started following a lot more African-American authors and activists and things like that. And it is incredible what you learn because I don't think I'm wrong. White people think they got the answer for everything, including this. And it's like, we're just not even close, right? It's like
Clueless. We're clueless.
yeah.
We are.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it's like common sense, but
yeah, it's all about perspective, you know, and the point from which you view something shapes what you think about it. And if you're not willing to say, okay, I'm going to move over here and look at it from a different direction, then you never understand that, well, maybe I'm looking at it all wrong. Or it might confirm you're looking at it correctly. But if you only look at it from this one point or one perspective, you can't be certain, especially if there's more than one perspective.
right. We've talked a lot about the Matrix movie. Have we talked about that on this call yet?
I don't think you and I have, but not on this call.
So for those of you who haven't seen the movie, I don't know that I'll recommend it, but it's a very interesting movie. And essentially what you discover is that we all live in a computer program, and that our real bodies are batteries for robots, and half the call is tuned out. I know that sounds really weird.
I'm just saying, when you say it out loud like that, I feel silly watching the movie.
Yeah, it's very weird. But what happens for the characters in the movie is they all of a sudden become aware of a world that exists that they didn't know existed.
Right.
And some of them are tempted to just forget that there is a real world outside the program, right? I'm just going to live in the program. And I think what you see in the movie is it requires someone outside the program to help someone inside the program see it. And I think that's what we've got to get better about, is let's let the people who see the world from that perspective, like you're saying, show us. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. And yes, you won't always like what you see under the rock. But let's not live ignorant and pretend like it's not there. That's the alternative. I don't want to live that way. All right, last one. And then we want to give you guys some resources that you can look at after our conversation is done. Last one is guard your heart. There will be guilt and shame that well up from this. And I found that one to be important for me. I tend to be, I'm enough of an empathy and compassion person, and it can get to the place where I just have this crushing guilt. And Gerard, I'd love if you could talk a little bit about maybe even like white guilt. That's a term that I think gets tossed around, and maybe not everybody understands what that is. But there have been times, I know, and Diane would agree, where it's just like, oh, I'm a wretch. Or, I mean, there's a dark, dark history of racism in our country. And I don't know, help us think through that a minute, Jarrell. Can we start here? How would you define like white guilt when people hear that? What are we saying?
I think it's probably a realization of what's happening, and it's like, oh, I was not aware of this. That, like, this is completely out of left field, and so there's a certain level of guilt probably that's felt. You know, I guess the best example would be our first call that we did, you know, early on, right after George Floyd was killed. Let's talk about race. And it was amazing to see the response from white people, positive, and at the same time blown away. They could not fathom that my boys had these experiences. You know, this was not something that happened decades ago, but has happened within the last few years. And I think there's an overwhelming sense of sadness for those individuals when they started to realize this. And how could I have missed this? And how could this be going on? And, well, what have I done? Or what shouldn't I have done? And so I think that's where it starts. And, you know, I think those are appropriate responses to when you're given something so heavy, not realizing it. But one of the things I think that's really important is to not feel guilty, because feeling guilty alone doesn't produce anything, right? It goes back. Thinking something's wrong doesn't make something right. You have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like when we've talked about privilege, what I've said time and time again is there's no reason to be guilty for having privilege, right? We all want privilege. We all strive to have privileges. There's nothing wrong with them. There's no reason to feel bad about having them. But at the same time, recognizing that we do have them, right? And so I think that's kind of, you know, when I think about that term, you know, that's what that means to me, at least.
You know, there's a great kind of old-fashioned word, and it's wallow. I don't know if you are familiar with. You can wallow in your guilt, which to me means just sit in it and feel bad. You know, so if guilt is good for anything, it's to get you away from wallowing in it and thinking about what can I do? So, you know, guilt can be, I think, the initiator or the stepping stone to action. And so in that case, I think it can be a good thing.
Yeah. One of the things that was meant to be an encouragement as well as a challenge is to say, hey, I'm willing to have coffee with anyone that wants to have coffee. And if you want me to come to your small group, I'd love to come and sit at your small group. And the reason why is because my thought was, one, I was encouraged by the people's response about how sad they were when they realized that this was still reality. But the other part of it was, I'm saying, okay, if you're serious, then let's talk so that you don't wallow in your guilt. Because if you're really moved by this, right, and not just sad, then you're like, hey, I want to do something. And I want to create the opportunity to do something. And if it wasn't with me, then go and, you know, talk or get to know someone else or study or whatever. But it is not just feeling sad for the sake of being sad.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Super helpful. So those were the 9 things. Like I said, that was kind of a amalgam of a bunch of different lists that are available anywhere on the internet if you look. And I encourage you to look and read wide on it. And by what different lists that are available anywhere on the internet if you look. Oh, I'm hearing myself. That was interesting.
I was clicking something and that was me. I was trying to find out if there were any Facebook questions.
Oh, gotcha. My encouragement is to read authors that you've never read before, that you're not overly familiar with. I think that sometimes my tendency is I just want to read more from who I've already read. Well, some of the people I've read a lot of are not the pros in this area. And so again, let's listen to the people who know. So a couple that I want to throw out that I think are good places to start. Will actually, at least 2 of them, I think are going to be featured on a new page is it up now? I don't remember.
Yes, it is.
It's up now on our website at Emmanuel. So emmanuelhome.org/race. It's just a new resource page that we want to make available to everybody. It includes my message from July 25th that kind of kicked this conversation off. Every installment of this conversation will be available on it, along with several other things to read online, and then some book recommendations. And so that's live now, and you can check it out when we're done here. But a couple books just to highlight, that I think are worth reading. One is called Be the Bridge. It's by Latasha Morrison. And Jarrell was actually telling me before the call that if you go to that website, there's some lists on things you can do. Some of which will probably go hand in hand with what we've talked about here tonight. But Be the Bridge would be one that I would really recommend reading.
There's also a Bible reading plan on the Bible app for that book.
Perfect. So if you're not familiar with the Bible app, just look up Bible in your app store and it'll be the first one, I'm pretty sure. What's awesome about that app is it has all kinds of plans about all kinds of things, but they've really done a good job around race of putting several plans together. So Be the Bridge would be one that I would highly recommend finding on that app. A lot of people, if you're looking for someone that you've heard of before, maybe, if you've ever listened to Moody Radio, Tony Evans is a name that you'll be familiar with. He's a pastor, I believe, in Texas. He is a phenomenal communicator. He might be an even better writer. Everything I've ever read by him has always been like inspiring and make me want to go for a run because he just gets me so charged up. He has a book out. It's called Oneness Embraced, I believe is what it's called. I think I've got a typo, but Oneness Embraced. And this is coming from a man who's Black, and he's a leader and pastor, and he's in the South. And so he can speak on a lot of the challenges that are being faced and how we can be one together. The one that I am just starting to read myself, audiobook, that Jarrell has looked into extensively, and there's actually some cool ties to our church that I can let Diane explain. It's called The Color of Compromise, and it's by a guy named Jamar Tisby. And there's also a study from him on Right Now Media. How many videos is it, Jarrell? Is it 8?
12.
Wow.
So 20 minute videos.
He is phenomenal. He is just brilliant, and the way that he will make you uncomfortable. Hopefully we've oiled the tracks a little bit for you to head into a conversation with Jamar. But he is really, really great. Diane, can you just share real briefly? Yeah. He's kind of a homegrown boy.
Jamar's in his early 40s. Grew up I live in Waukegan. Grew up here, went to Waukegan High School. He was one of the kids that I first came in contact with through an event that I went to. I was so impressed with him. Went and said to a friend, "Ma, I met this kid, Jamar. I think his name is Jamar." She said, "Oh, Jamar Tisby. He's my son's best friend." Turns out Jamar was in our youth group at Emmanuel Church. Jamar also, did he not mentor Angel Lagunas? Jarrell, didn't he say that? Angel is, part of Emmanuel Church, on the worship team, and Jamar was one of his mentors when he was in high school. He has gone on to have phenomenal success as a speaker, author, pastor. I'm hoping we can pull in the, hey, you went to high school here with our youth group. Won't you, famous person, now come and speak to us? But yeah, great background, wonderful family, solid here in the community. So I just can't say enough about how much I have appreciated him and admired him over the years.
Yeah. Jarrell, you've watched all 20 videos, I believe, or 12 videos.
Yes.
Anything you want to say about Jamar and his book?
It's fantastic. You may not agree with everything he says, but he delivers it correctly and appropriately, and he gives you things to think about. And I think it's worth the read. It's just a great book. What you call it, Mike Van Lanningham. If you've ever listened to the two Mikes, he and I talked about the book, and we've had some great conversations around it. And so I would strongly recommend that you at least watch the videos, definitely read the books, and in December, he's actually going to release a study guide to go along with the video series.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think you can get his book on any platform. So
it's on Amazon. Just go there and
Kindle, all that good stuff. So guys, this has been so fun. It really has. And I'm so grateful for you both. And Jarrell, thank you for being the kind of leader that steps into a really sticky situation and a place that a lot of people would not want to go, but you were willing to go there. So I'm just so grateful that you were willing to have such a vulnerable and honest conversation with us and with everybody. And I know I'm speaking for everybody that's watching, but thank you so much, both of you.
Thanks for letting me be here. It's been a total joy.
Yeah,
Really.
likewise. Likewise.
Yeah, thank you for the courage it takes to do this. You know, from the sermon on the 5th through the 4 conversations and the talks we've had before. I really appreciate it. One of the things is there are things like this that give me hope that the experiences that I've had and the experiences that my boys have had thus far, that there's hope that that won't continue to be the case for them, you know, as they approach my age. So thank you. It really means a lot. It's encouraging. The people that have, you know, reached out, it's encouraging. There's been so many things that, again, just give me a lot of hope.
Yeah.
So I just hope that we continue on with, you know, not just being, you know, non-racist, but anti-racist.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you to everybody that's watched, whether you've joined us here and there or been here every week. We sincerely thank you for letting us enter into your home and have this conversation alongside of you. It just says a lot about you. And, you know, I think Jarrell would echo what he's just said when it comes to you. You give us hope that you're willing to make this kind of sacrifice to listen in. You know, we didn't ask you to listen to one 35-minute message. We asked you to listen to 4 one-hour conversations, and you've been here for them all. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting us do this and being a part of this with us. I can tell you for Emmanuel Church, this is not the end of this conversation. This is really just the beginning. And we are going to continue to be a community that makes an impact on our community at large, and especially in this area. So there will be more to come in the future. In the meantime, I hope everybody has a great evening and a great week ahead. Thanks again. We'll see you on Sunday, 10 a.m.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everybody.